Well, hello, Jamie, and welcome to Rebuilding My Health Radio. I'm excited to have you on today to talk about your health story.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here and share. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of go back to the start of your health challenges. When did it all begin and what were you experiencing?
Well, looking back, knowing what I know now, ever since I was a child, I had issues. I had like a lot of vagus nerve, like digestion issues. Like growing up, I did not know that it wasn't normal to only go to the bathroom like once a week. I mean, like my digestion was off. I definitely had food sensitivities. So, and every time I ate, I would be like, I don't feel good, but it was never my mom. She just didn't connect it, and
Mhm.
I don't think she was like, did you wash your hands, but not did you go to the bathroom? So I always had these, but I just didn't know what it was. And then in my 20s, I started to have a lot of hormonal concerns, and my body I had no energy. Like I felt like my body was shutting down, my brain was shutting down. My cycle I was completely irregular. So I started to question it. Like towards the end of my 20s and the beginning of my 30s, I started to really question, like, I am turning gray. I have no energy. I don't have a cycle. Like something's wrong with me. And I always had digestive distress. So I just never thought much about that, but I was curious. But really, when my brain started to just completely not work, that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to all the doctors. I luckily at this time I had moved, I lived in San Francisco, and there was a lot of alternative medicine. And it was really like I went to like 10 regular doctors. They're like, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, I can't. I mean, I was seriously like almost gray. I'm 32 years old at this point. And so I started at 30, 32, and then I had no energy. I could barely get out of bed. I um, couldn't focus. I couldn't think. Like I've always had like a pretty high powered career. Like I was stressed, and I was like, my brain just didn't work. And I'm like, something's off. So all these
Yeah.
doctors, they ran all these tests, nothing's wrong with you, nothing's wrong with you. And I'm like, so there's something wrong. So I actually had at that point started going to nutrition school to try to figure out what was wrong with me, and found out there was a really great functional nutritionist and doctor that I saw, and they were like, there's a lot wrong with you. And so because all of these other doctors were like, I mean, I honestly had a doctor say to me, you're just getting, your brain doesn't work and your hair is gray because you're just getting older. And I was like, I'm 32 years old. You're crazy.
Yeah.
I do not
Yeah.
accept that. Like, I do not accept that. And so that's when it kind of started, is like, I look back now that I always had digestion issues, but when my hormones started failing, my brain stopped working, and I couldn't get out of bed, I was like, we got to figure this out.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And so frustrating to go to 10 doctors who found nothing, said this is normal. So,
And they all did. In one way or another, they just didn't look in the right places. They didn't ask the right questions, like
mhm.
they were all looking at like one thing. They weren't like systemically looking at like, how does everything connect to everything else? Like hormones apparently to them didn't connect to gut didn't connect to
Mhm.
brain. It was like there was nobody putting all the pieces together until um I went to nutrition school and learned the right questions to ask, and got to luckily see a functional nutritionist and doctor that tested, hormones and gut and blood, like all of the things together.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, when you started digging in and doing the testing and all that, what did you find? What were the causes behind your health issues?
Yeah, so the first thing, which I like already knew, but we discovered, was I obviously had a very disrupted gut. Like I had leaky gut, and I had tested. The biggest call out was that my B12 levels were extremely low, like like 120-ish. And that she, of course, the doctor was like, oh my gosh, which all these other doctors saw that and didn't think anything of it, but she was like, you like went through all the B12 symptoms, which I had of deficiency, which is numbing, balance issues, brain fog, and like, cold extremities, like everything. And that can actually turn to nerve damage and being paralyzed. And if you're under 100, that's usually when you see that, like completely, like you can be paralyzed. And I was so low. And so
Oh,
she's like, you need B12 stat. So she basically put me on some sublingual B12, and nothing changed, nothing moved. And so things were getting worse. And she's tested me for antibodies against intrinsic factor, which is autoimmunity against essentially B12. So basically my gut lining was so damaged that it was causing antibodies against the absorption of B12 and other B vitamins. So I wasn't getting any B vitamins from any food that I ate. It was just like, it wasn't like I wasn't getting vitamins and minerals, and basically. And so B12 is so important. I mean, it's like the energy and mitochondria of every cell in our body. And I hadn't probably been absorbing it for years and years. And so she started me on shots, B12 shots, and I took them every single day for about 6 months. And now I have to take them for the rest of my life. I take them now every 2 weeks, but I had to work up to that. And like, I mean, it's called pernicious anemia, which is deadly anemia, and it's serious and it's rare, but it's one of the things that doctors used to always check for when you get a blood panel. They always check your B12, but the ranges on the B12 ranges on most CBCs it's crazy. It's like 300 to 700. Well, that's a huge difference, and we function optimally at 1,000. So I just like to make sure that people really pay attention to that, because it was really scary. And it was crazy after 6 months to realize, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this is what people actually feel like. Like I had never felt like that. Like walking straight, like I would always be like leaning, and like my friends were always like, why you just want to be close to me? And I was like, no, I didn't realize it, but your feet, you can't feel all of the nerves on your feet. So you have balance issues. And so you're just trying to wobble. And it's like, I didn't even know what it was like to walk in a straight line until I was in my 30s.
oh,
Yeah, it's great. And then my brain, I'm like, oh, my brain's like really on fire, and it's like a battery. So I get my shot,
yeah.
still to this day, I feel like I am charged up, and then I can feel it waning and waning and waning. And then I charge back up. Yeah.
Wow. So because every 2 weeks you're getting the shot, and then you start to feel kind of like lower energy and such as you get closer. Oh, that's really interesting. Wow. Yeah. And it's just like your body is kind of in this permanent state of not being able to absorb the B12, like
So I
fully, or yeah.
So I will never be able to, and that's the thing with pernicious anemia and B12 deficiency. When you get to a certain point, any damage that is done cannot be repaired. So let's
Wow.
say if I was paralyzed, I wouldn't be able to repair that by taking B12. So since it's an autoimmune, I have antibodies against the B12 from ever being absorbed in that intrinsic factor in my gut lining. So I have to continuously take care of my gut and make sure that anything, and I think with any autoimmunity, once you find the root causes and the triggers, that you have to keep that integrity up. So even though I always take the B12 shots, because I can't absorb them in the gut, like I won't be able to get it from food, I wouldn't be able to get it from taking like just a pill, I still have to keep up the integrity of the gut, because if I don't, then I would be prone to other autoimmune diseases. And that's really the case with any autoimmunity, right? Like you
Mhm.
have to, once you're prone to one, the immune system is on alert, and it can be
Mhm.
prone to others. So like the integrity of my gut lining is everything.
Wow. Yeah. So tell me what kind of gut healing you needed to do. Like you said, you had leaky gut. So I guess kind of addressing that. Were there any other gut issues that you needed to really address?
Yes. So I definitely had to address all food sensitivities, and all of the foods that were causing in the first place to have the gut lining start to open up. And for me, it's a lot of sugar, uh, definitely gluten, and some other types of grains, but mostly it was gluten for me and sugar. And so
Mhm.
once I was able to, and there was a lot of other foods. There was like 50 things I couldn't eat. I mean, there was a time I was only eating 6 things when I was going through my healing phase. But once I was able to heal and seal my gut lining, then those other foods weren't getting through into my immune system and causing my immune system to be on alert. So now I can eat everything but like 3 things. But it used to be that I could only eat 6, which is pretty wild. So I had to do that. And once I did that, I addressed working on my hormones because they were also out of whack because my immune system was on alert, constantly sending, cortisol, like and other hormones to disrupt my cycle of estrogen and progesterone. Like all of my sex hormones were off. So that took a while to heal. And then from there, I just did more energy work. But yeah, it was kind of like a layered approach. And I think that's what happens to all of us. I mean, depending on what's going on, it's like, what's the first thing we have to seal? And then
Mhm.
work on all the other pathways of restoration in our body that got disrupted from the beginning. It was gut,
Mhm.
then hormones, then energy. So,
Right. Yeah. And making sure, yeah, that you had the B12, the vitamins that you needed. Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
so yeah. And that
So did
affects,
your yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, which also affects the brain, right? So it was kind of like the whole healing of the gut and the hormones also had to like restore the brain function power. So
Right. Yeah. So for the hormone aspect, did you find that like some of the things you were doing were supporting your hormones, or did you do specific hormone support?
well, I got off of birth control, which for my case was really causing a lot of disruption as well, which I didn't realize
Mhm.
it. That was a compounding effect too. Like I wasn't able to take estrogen, and I think that this is part of my immune system was on alert, but I wasn't able to take estrogen because it was giving me the oral migraines, the visual migraines.
Ooh,
And where you see that, and again, nobody put that together when they like you see that backwards prismatic C. That's really the sign of you're not detoxing out estrogen properly, and that can cause an aneurysm. I mean, it's so once we figured that out, then I was put on progesterone, and I did that for so long that it actually like that was a part of disrupting my cycle to where I can't, like that combined with B12 deficiency, like couldn't get pregnant. So not that I was trying, but that is a part of it. So that was
wow.
kind of unfortunate as well, that for 10 years I was on like this extended cycle of like a slow period, but that was disrupting again, it's all about the pathway. So that like your body's always going to take the path of least resistance. So that burned in a pathway in
Mhm.
my hormonal cycle that caused disruption that connected to stress and inflammation. And it's like all of these little things that we don't think to analyze, and then they become a burned in pathway that you have to restore and fix.
Right. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you had taken, yeah, birth control pills and then progesterone, and both of those sort of disrupted your hormones, kind of your natural hormone pattern.
It
Sounds
was
like.
like it was kind of still connected to, I think, with autoimmunity, you have to have at the time, a leaky gut, you have to have a genetic predisposition, and you have to have a stressful internal or external event that just your body is like, that's it. And I think for
Mhm.
me, the 10 years, obviously the whole lifetime of that point of food sensitivities, like that caused the leaky gut. And then the hormone and the stressful job and like, all of that for 10 years, I think just compounded and compounded to the point where my body was like, that's it. So
Mhm.
I think that that's what led up to the actual autoimmunity triggering event. So
Mhm.
then once we started working on the hormones, I got off birth control and just naturally restored my cycle.
Mhm. Nice. Great, great. Um, so I know you told me that you kind of grew up vegetarian,
Mhm.
and I'm just curious, like, do you feel like that was part of this, and kind of is that something that maybe, your genetics couldn't handle, or the majority of people can't handle that kind of diet? Or tell me more about that.
Well, yeah. So I definitely had a genetic predisposition for pernicious anemia. Not that we knew that at the time, but I did. I think that and I do advocate for this, like with my clients, if they have children, to do like a 23andMe or an ancestry.com and then like export the raw genetic data. And then I can run it through a nutrition database to see if there's any predispositions. Because let's say if my mom knew that, she would have, as I was a vegetarian, she could have supplemented me with B12, and that
Mhm.
would have helped. Probably because my antibodies against intrinsic factor is because that's where I was the weakest. Like that's kind of how
Mhm.
it works as well. So I don't think that every vegetarian needs to be concerned about this, but every vegetarian
Mhm.
needs to supplement with a quality B12, because really
Mhm.
you get that mostly from animal products. And there is some debate that you can get it in other ways, but it's not enough, and it's not as
Mhm.
bioavailable for the amounts that you need. So
Mhm.
I think that's the most important thing, is that if you are vegetarian, vegan, I mean, for anyone, obviously take care of your gut lining, but
Mhm.
essentially, like, you have to do that, and you have to supplement with certain things that you just need in higher quantities because you're not necessarily getting it from food. And if you do know your genetic data and your predispositions, then that's good, because then you can supplement more. So
Mhm.
that's part of it, is if I would have known that and I would have supplemented, I probably would have not gotten pernicious anemia. That's not to say that
Mhm.
I wouldn't have got autoimmunity still, but
Mhm.
it might have affected.
Right. Yeah, right, right. Hard to know. So do you continue to be vegetarian, just supplement with B12?
Yeah. No, I am not a vegetarian anymore, but I am still really mindful about like the meat
Mhm.
that I consume. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a vegetarian anymore, because that whole thing, when I started my healing journey and I can only eat like 6 things, most of them were not vegetarian, and I needed that to heal and restore my body. So I
Mhm.
switched. Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine, I haven't had that experience, but I can imagine it's difficult to make that switch to begin eating meat when you haven't for your throughout your life, right?
Yeah, it was very difficult. And I think what had to switch in my mind is more, and I see this with a lot of people that are going through a healing phase, is that I had to start to learn to look at food more as nourishment and
Mhm.
something that is healing to me, no matter what source it came from. And doing that on an energetic, mental, and physical level, not just
Mhm.
eating to eat. It's like, okay, this is healing me, this is nourishing me. And that switch helped me to get through from being a non-vegetarian, or I'm sorry, a vegetarian to a non-vegetarian. But also in
Right.
general, it just helped me because I was in a state of being scared of food no matter what it was. Because
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
always hurt me. So now it's like, okay, how can I switch my mind frame to this is healing me?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of an important mindset shift there, for sure. So So tell me more about the kind of the causes that you've found, like you said, the energetic, mental, and physical causes of autoimmunity, and what triggers that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I call myself too, as an energetic mental physical nutritionist, because I really feel like to do a full healing transformation, you have to focus on all of them. And that is part of my story. And so for autoimmunity, talking about the three reasons that it generally happens, well, I feel like those are all, it's not just physical. If you think about, yeah,
Mhm.
sure, there's a genetic predisposition, and then a leaky gut, and then a stressful event, whether it's internal or external. Well, internal and external stress usually comes from habits. It comes from an energy, and it could, and leaky gut too. I feel like I look at both of those as leaks and boundaries. And so we kind of have to find out, okay, well, what was stressful and where are you leaky energetically and mentally and physically? And then what boundaries do we need to set around that? Because if not, you're just going to always come back to what, if you don't have the boundary, you're always going to come back to that. So we can, let's say, seal your gut. But if what gets your gut aggravated from an energetic or mental perspective is that your environment is stressful, or you
Mhm.
don't have you don't have boundaries with toxic people or toxic like work or whatever is going
Mhm.
on that's causing you to be stressed out, that's just going to aggravate your gut again. So we kind of
Mhm.
need to understand like everything around you. Where is it leaky? Where does it need to be sealed? And how can you essentially put your self-love, self-worth, self-trust first? And I think that that's the most important part of a healing journey, if you actually want to transform and not come back to the state that got you there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can do all the gut healing and B12, but if you are in a super stressful, situation, lifestyle, work, or relationships, then it's gonna just kind of, yeah, hold you back for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's also realizing that you're always going to have stress, and it's not the stress necessarily that's the what's really bad for you. It's how resilient and how you handle the stress. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's part of what I like to help people with, because I think, first I was like, oh, gut health, hormone health, brain health. But it all came back to the point of, if you're not resilient, if you don't have these boundaries, it's just going to go back into the same state. And so I really like to address that, especially with autoimmunity and feeling like it's all about integrity. Like I was saying before, if your body's not in integrity, if your gut's not integrity, then you're prone to other autoimmunity. And like nobody has time for that. We just don't like
Right.
dealing with enough, So like, how do we just get the energetic, mental, physical states in integrity? So
Mhm. Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about the role of trauma in healing, and maybe, in your own story and what you've seen with your clients.
mhm. Yeah, so my own story definitely informs how I work with others, but I realize now, and it took a long time to go through this by doing um, kind of subconscious work, and cracking open the subconscious of just like, where did this start? Because I don't, especially with pernicious anemia, it affects the memory. So I really don't have a lot of childhood memories. So I've had to kind of piece this together and then go through um, but I know now, like I still today can't, I don't feel comfortable going into grocery stores because they are traumatizing to me, because I can tell as a little kid, they scared me. Like the food hurt me. Like I didn't know how to internalize. I didn't understand that when I was little, that every time I ate, I didn't feel good. But now I think what I did was associate food with pain, and then that
Oh.
obviously pauses. And I think this happens a lot to children when they don't know how to verbalize and
Mhm.
understand and process. Then it turns into a gut brain vagus nerve thing. And then we store that in our, those emotions in our physical. And then that can cause pathways to, be disrupted. But for me, trauma, that was the beginning. And then I had a lot of traumatic experiences just like dealing with not knowing how to deal with stress as a child, and I had a lot of stress. So that was things I had to uncover, get to the root of them. And I do that for myself, and for my clients, I do subconscious mindset yoga nidra. So basically, like where you're kind of in that brainwave sleep state of being awake and asleep, and open up the subconscious and kind of find where the root of it is, like where, if it limiting beliefs, and usually it comes back to confidence, self-love, self-worth, self-trust. And so we try to like release those out of the physical, and then implant positive affirmations of the biology of belief to heal. And I think that that's really important, because if we don't address that, then again, your body, the stress, the cortisol, the hormones are always going to come back to trying to deal with the trauma. And then that's going to inform the physical state of how resilient we are to stress. So for me, it took a lot. I would say I'm just now, actually, in the past 10 years now, uncovering all of the things that happened and how my body dealt with them emotionally and how that affected the physical. So I like to incorporate that with my clients, because it's so, I feel like that's always the game changer, is once they release those limiting beliefs that was holding them back from a traumatic experience.
Right. Yeah, that is so interesting. And I think so many of us who've had a health journey have trauma around that has to be resolved. So it may not be, even something from childhood, though most of us do have something from childhood, but just the trauma around being unwell and such is very real. So yeah. So Jamie, how's your health today after all of the work that you've done?
It's really good. So I am actually always going to have to take B12. But other than that, I feel like I've reversed aging. I went from, falling apart, not being able to like barely walk, to couldn't think, constantly spent every day in the bathroom, to now I'm like, I can do whatever I want. I eat everything but like 3 things. Like, I'm definitely connected to understanding the language that my body, what makes it happy, what it doesn't like. And so I am just so proud, and this is why I do what I do, is I don't want anybody to ever feel held back by their body.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in my 40s, I'll be 46 in a month. And like, I feel like better than I've ever felt in my entire life. Like when somebody was saying like, oh, what, to be 20 again? And I was like, oh no. like physically, I felt like I was like, I could barely function. And now I feel like this is amazing. So, my health is
Yeah.
great. Obviously I have to do things to maintain it, which is keeping my gut healthy. And having really good boundaries. Like I have very strong boundaries around sleep, like I know that that's something I have essentially like a low energy disease. Like I have to protect my sleep. I have to protect my energy. I have to protect my time. I have to eat what I know my body likes. And that's just the way it is. And I look at that as from an empowered place, not like, oh, I don't get that. It's like, I don't want that,
Yeah. Right. Oh, I agree. I think people see sometimes the lifestyle that I have and they're like, oh, I feel so sorry for you because you're taking all these like strict steps. But yeah, like you said, I've never felt better. So yeah, it's worth it. It's really worth it, right?
And that's, everybody could look at it that way, instead of like, you can't have it. It's like, it's empowering to know how to communicate with your body, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. Not like weak. And I just wish that that's a message that anybody who's going through something could hear. Cause I hear that with my clients all the time. Like, I just wish I could have that. I was like, wait till you get to the point to say, I don't want that.
Yeah.
That's the best thing.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Um, so, Jamie, kind of considering your own journey and the clients that you've helped, what are maybe some tips that you have for others going through something similar, going through similar health challenges?
I think it's to really connect to wanting to like not like anybody tell you that if you don't feel good and something's wrong, to not stop until you figure it out. Because I think we all do have an instinctual connection to what we're supposed to feel like. You know what I mean? And I think that so often we just take somebody's answer and they say you're fine, but we're not fine and we know it. So I really just say don't give up, find somebody who's willing to listen to you, who connects with you and who understands, and will figure it out. And also like learn the language of your body, like your body's communicating with you. And if you have a headache consistently, or your cycle's off, or you don't have any energy, or you can't sleep, or your digestion's off, don't just be like, oh, I guess that's normal. It's not normal. Your body's
Yeah.
talking to you. And
Right.
don't give up until you figure it out. And if you innately feel like, I know there's more to this, you're probably right.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah. Such good advice. So, Jamie, tell listeners how they can find you and follow you.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Travathan, and I'm the Gut Goddess on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. I also have a Facebook and a YouTube as the Gut Goddess. You can also check me out on my website. I have a quiz. I think we're going to link to maybe in the show notes that you can take
Uh-huh.
to kind of
Yep.
understand your sleep wake energy cycle, which is like your circadian rhythm and how that affects your day to day. And I love to connect with people. So if you're on one of those social media platforms, reach out to me and I would love to just get to know you. So
Awesome. Yep. And we will have all that information in the show notes so that folks can connect with you. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on to share your health story. It's super interesting to me, and because B12, is something that probably people don't think, or it's definitely conventional doctors don't think to necessarily look at. And as you said, so essential. So I think that's such an interesting angle and aspect of your story, and how it, it kind of has transformed your life to get that and your gut kind of back in order. So thank you so much for coming on.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.